Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm finally painting these 15mm scale plastic Tiger tanks from the Plastic Soldier Company, which I assembled a while ago. Here's a link. I'm aiming to get these to look at least a little bit similar to my existing Battlefront Tiger, which will probably be used as their command tank or something. I start by attaching the models to popsicle sticks for holding and priming. For priming, I used Vallejo Black Surface Primer through my airbrush. Everyone's seen priming in black though, so on to the next step. I applied Vallejo Model Color Middlestone, thinned enough to easily flow through the airbrush. I did have to apply a couple of coats of this because it's so thin. What we're aiming for is a nice solid coat all over the tank. Next, I mixed some of the Middlestone 50-50 with Model Color Iraqi Sand and did a light dry brush on all the edges of the tank. Because I'm doing a soft edge camo, it will be tricky to do this once the other colours are on. I then numbered the sticks holding each tank as a way to keep the turrets and hulls as matched pairs. I then sprayed lines of Vallejo Model Color Reflective Green, thinned enough to be airbrushed. For this I'm using an airbrush with a smaller needle than I would for priming and base coating because I don't want the lines to be too thick. I take my time and go carefully and slowly. I'm not really following any specific pattern. In my mind, this is a camo scheme that the crew has applied in the field, so it's not going to be perfect. I like to paint the lines towards the turret. Then, I hold the turret over its hull to eyeball where the green on the hull should meet the turret. Then I continue the lines up the turret. It won't be perfect, but if anybody asks, the turret was turned while they were painting. Yes, that's it. The next step, obviously, is to apply the brown part of the camo. For this I'm using Model Color Chocolate Brown, which I'm sure isn't entirely historically accurate, but I like how it looks. Again, field applied camo, so it's possible. This step is pretty much the same as with the reflective green, trying to match the lines on the hull with those on the turret, and then continuing up onto the turret roof, all the while trying to keep the green and brown separated by some Middlestone. I think it worked out alright. Next I apply some gloss varnish in preparation for the decals. I wasn't sure if the Viking Division insignia would fit next to the headlight, so I glossed a backup location for that. I add decals at this stage so they're affected by the weathering just like the rest of the base colours. I let the gloss dry overnight and then applied the decals. These are Plastic Soldier Company SS Viking Division decals and I'm soaking them in Humbrol Decal Fix. I'm using a blob of plasticine to hold the model in place, and I pick the decal up with tweezers, making sure to only be holding the paper part. I put some decal fix onto the decal location and then use the brush to gently slide the decal off the paper and onto the model. I use the same brush to maneuver the decal around until I'm satisfied with its position. I add more decal fix if the decal becomes hard to move. A knife can also carefully be used to move the decal, but you may scratch the paint below it. I decided to place the numbers on the rear of the turret because I think it looks cool there, and that's all the reason I need. The cross is easily placed on the side of the hull. I only put it on the right side of the tank as the left side would be obscured by cables. The Viking insignia did actually fit next to the headlight, which is nice. Of course it does pay to have a backup location if you're uncertain. Next I add a coat of Army Painter Strong Tone mixed 1 part Strong Tone and 3 parts water. This is just to darken everything up a tiny bit and create some dirt in the gaps. Then I decided to try adding some more highlighting. I carefully dry brushed a mix of 3 parts Middlestone and 1 part Iraqi Sand on the edges of the Middlestone parts of the tank, being careful to avoid the green and brown. This isn't really an essential step, but I feel it adds a nice little bit of depth. I then did the same with the green using 3 parts Reflective Green and 1 part Model Color Pastel Green, and the brown parts with 3 parts Chocolate and 1 part Iraqi Sand. Now I pay some more attention to the decals. I want these tanks to be fairly clean, but not brand new, so I add some Secret Weapon Concrete Wash to the black parts of the decals using an Army Painter Insane Detail brush. This makes the black look a little bit faded and worn. Next I do the same with some Army Painter Strong Tone to add a little bit of dirtiness to the white parts. To continue weathering, I add some chipping to the tank. I made a mix of about 60% Vallejo Model Color Black Grey and 40% Model Color Mahogany. I gently dab it on with some foam from an old Flames of War package. You can of course buy foam brushes, but if you've got the packaging laying around, why not make use of it? This is a little bit like dry brushing in that you want to remove most of the paint from the sponge. Just be sure to use a dabbing motion and avoid dragging the sponge across the model or you'll get a mess instead of chips. At this scale I don't see much need to do anything more than this for chipping. If you're really keen though, you could add highlights around the chips. I think I succeeded in not going over the top with this effect this time. Next I start on the tracks. For this I'm using Vallejo Model Color Black Grey. I start by using a fairly large brush on the larger surfaces of the tracks, then I move down to a smaller brush to get into the smaller, more difficult to reach areas and to get the tyres on the road wheels. Don't forget to paint any spare track links you may have on the hulls or turrets. Next, I darken the tracks using a mix of 2 parts strong tone to 1 part water. I just kind of slather this onto the tracks and tyres, but I'm careful to avoid splashing it onto the inner parts of the road wheels. I also add it into the gaps in the drive sprockets and idler wheels. Again, don't forget any of the spare track links you may have. While that wash was drying, I applied black grey on all the metal tools and cables on the hulls. Just pick out all the parts like hammers and shovels. Don't forget to paint the sides of these parts. It's tricky, but worth the effort. This was probably the most time-consuming part of the entire paint job, mostly because of the cables. Paint them as carefully as you can. I made quite a few mistakes, but they shouldn't be too easy to notice and they should hopefully look like chipping. I think if I ever build Plastic Soldier Company Tigers again, I'll be tempted to just shave the cables off the sides. Back to the tracks. I decided to try an experiment. I mixed a tiny bit of MIG Old Rust pigment powder in some pigment fixer and made a quite diluted mix. I tried to use capillary action to get it to seep into the recessed areas of the tracks to represent old rust and dried mud. I think I could have gone a little bit lighter with this. Next, I did a dry brushing of black grey on the outer parts of the tracks, just to hide some of the rusty colour and tone it down a little bit. I do like my tracks to have a grey colour to them. I follow this with a lighter dry brush of Vallejo Model Colour Basalt Grey. With this I also hit the edges of the road wheels. I wasn't careful enough with the road wheels and got too much grey on the rim parts for my liking, so I touched them up with some plain middle stone on the middle stone parts. I didn't bother with the other colours, but I will rub a 2B pencil on them later to represent shiny, recently scraped metal. Next, I paint the wooden handles on the tools with Vallejo Model Colour Beige Brown. This is much like the earlier step with the grey. Go slowly and carefully and try to get the sides of the handles as well as the tops. Mistakes with this colour won't blend in as well in my opinion. Don't forget to paint this wooden block. Though, if you want to, you could just imagine the crew had painted their tank right over the top of all the tools. I don't think this would look as good though. After that is dry, I add a mix of 2 parts soft tone and 1 part water to the tools, just to give them a slight variation in colour and a bit of depth. I then add the same mix to the upper portion of the exhaust covers. This is to simulate heat damage to the paint. Next I add some Vallejo Model Colour Light Orange to the exhaust tip thingies, whatever they're called. I don't intend for this to be particularly visible, but it should nicely simulate some rust under a lot of soot. Before applying the soot, I apply a heavy wash of dark tone to the exhausts. Then, while priming other models, I quickly sprayed some black primer around the exhaust of the Tigers. I set my airbrush so the trigger could only move back a tiny bit and thus only spray a very small amount of paint. I really didn't want to mess these models up at this point. Next, I decided to try something I've not done before. Instead of using Army Painter Wash to pin wash the gaps, I decided to try using some very thin oil-based paint. The capillary action seems much better than with watered down wash. I probably should have put down a coat of satin or gloss varnish before doing this, but it seems to have worked well enough without it. This step still took me a long time to place the black in all the gaps on the engine deck and along all the lines and crevices, but it was a lot quicker than it has ever been with a non-alcohol based wash. I feel the result I got from this has made the entire model look a bit more dirty, which I like. I think next time I'll see how differently it works with a varnish. I'm not 100% satisfied with it, but I never really am. It works well enough for me to keep though. I added a couple of touches of Secret Weapon Heavy Body Black Wash to places like the muzzle brake and a couple of areas I didn't feel the alcohol wash was dark enough. And then I applied some AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish. Not very interesting to watch being sprayed though, so here's the next step. As a finishing touch, I rub a 2B pencil onto the areas of the tank where the paint has been rubbed off and the metal underneath left shiny and not yet dulled. Things like tracks, wheel rims, and metal tools. I feel this is a better and more subtle method than actually painting those areas in a metallic paint, at least in 15mm scale. And that's it. Let's look at the final result. As I said, I'm not 100% satisfied with how these turned out, but I feel like I've learned and improved my painting skills, which is the important thing. I think I've managed to achieve a pretty good tabletop standard though. They would look pretty cool on a nice table with some good scenery. I think the tracks are a lot better than my previous efforts, and the entire paint job is an improvement over my Battlefront Tiger for sure. I'm quite a slow painter, so this did take me quite a while to actually finish, though I suppose if I were keen and willing to do longer solid blocks of painting, I could get this done in a couple of days. I tend to paint one step and then do something else. After all, this is for relaxation, not a job. I have no idea how realistic the markings and camo scheme is, but I think it looks plausible enough. My Flames of War armies aren't really themed at all. I just paint things how I like them. I will include a list of colours that I used in the description below. Obviously they're not the be-all end-all in German colours, they're just what I think looks good. Perhaps that can help somebody else in choosing their colours. As for perfect historical accuracy, I don't have the desire or energy to research the perfect shade of Dunkelgelb or anything like that. My brain would explode. I might try adding a little bit of weathering powder to these later. I'm undecided. I think they look plenty dirty as they are. Like most of my tanks, they're not really covered in mud or dust. They look like they might have spent a lot of time in a city, probably one filled with a lot of smoke and soot. I'm quite pleased to have finally crossed these Tigers off my extensive to-paint list. I haven't really done much painting recently, though I will endeavour to paint more in future. Bonus imaginary internet points to anybody who guesses what my next painting project is. I'm just about to start and I'm really excited about it. I hope this video has been helpful or interesting for you. Maybe you've got some of your own Tigers you'd like to share in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks for watching. Farewell.